Lock your doors, turn on every light, and brace yourself. What you're about to hear are true accounts so chilling, they'll leave you questioning the very nature of reality. These aren't campfire tales. These are real encounters with the unexplained, the paranormal, and the downright terrifying. From ghostly apparitions to terrifying encounters with unseen forces, these stories will send shivers down your spine. Prepare to be captivated and horrified as we delve into the darkest corners of human experience.
Reminds me of the book called Touching the Void, where these two guys are climbing this glacier or mountain and something goes wrong and one of them has to cut the rope and let the other one loose, otherwise they were both gonna die, and the one who gets cut off lands in this crevice and actually survives. Either way, this one was shared by Reddit user Beach Knoll, whose grandpa had just gone back from World War II and decided exploring was his new hobby. Him and his friends went into Mammoth Cave despite it being on privately owned property. Laws were a lot more lax back then, clearly. Either way, while in there with their flashlights, they had a group of people somewhere else in the cave because of all the echoing. They quickly cut the lights since the sounds didn't seem very friendly, and they waited. His grandpa and friends went deeper into the cave to lose them, and imagine this level of darkness where you can't even see your own hand in front of you. It's like a black hole with just no light coming in. They then spent 17 hours in there hiding, and the only thing getting them through it was one of their friends saying, "We didn't survive that to die in here," obviously referring to the war. And no, you didn't, my friend, so you're gonna survive that. Coming in at number 9 is a secret society. This one's from Reddit user Ludovico Specs and was about the basement that was under his college language lab. Turns out the place was turned into some sort of secret society in the 1800s, and the whole building used to belong to them at one point. It had hospital lights all over it, which were always just very creepy. There's an inch of water on the floor too, but the weirdest part was the main room. It had vaulted ceilings supported by pillars that had stone skulls mounted on top of them. On top of the skulls were metal spikes, which is just sus as well. Why would the secret society need just skulls on poles? It's weird. The front room also had this also the backstage area that had a chair with a bunch of questions written on it, like were they a secret society or a cult? Now the user thought his discovery was pretty cool, so he came back the next night with some of his friends to show them. The night after that, he tried coming back again, but it had been mysteriously padlocked. No one wanted him snooping, evidently. And number 8, we have the closet. This one would have sent me running for the hills and was shared by You See The Thing Is on Reddit. The police had confiscated this house from a biker gang a few years back, and it had sat empty ever since. So the user, who works at an insurance company, had to go to the house and assess its damage. We already know insurance people always screw you over, so okay. Now while in there, he described the house as pretty normal, you know, white walls, red plywood flooring, the door locks weren't rusted yet, so it was all pretty good, pretty normal. But then they opened the linen closet to see deep scratch marks all over the inside and dents like someone was trying to escape from inside of there. The worst part was that right on the back wall was this red splatter that had been painted over but was still very visible. The user's thoughts went to the person finally escaping to then somehow getting shot in the head, which is beyond screwed up, but I mean the scratch marks, the dents, like it makes sense. Filling at number 7 slot is Choo Choo. Now this one was shared by Reddit user Hi Dingy Doo, who shared that he used to walk along this old abandoned railroad line just to observe some wildlife, which sounds really peaceful actually, and I'm sure it was until this encounter. Over the years, the metal tracks rusted and were taken out, and all the equipment was also taken away. The whole thing became overgrown with shrubs and weeds, and so to an outside perspective, you never really would have been able to tell it had been a train track ever. Either way, one night the user went walking there with a friend, and out of nowhere they hear a voice saying choo choo. Shitting themselves, they turned around to see this old smiling man crouched in the bushes just staring at them from the dark shadows, like, who the hell are you, bro? Like, I'm just trying to vibe and observe some wildlife, like, who the frick are you? Oh hell no! I would have literally just kicked the old man. I'm really not as violent as you guys think I am, but like, I will kick people if I have to. I'm not even worried about it. Now at number 6 are the cats. This one makes my blood boil and was shared by Redditor Jetstream Wolf 12. They shared that there's this one hotel in their hometown that's super run down and that everyone just kind of breaks into fun. So they and 2 friends decided to crawl into the basement from a side entrance. Initially all they saw was graffiti, but as they went upstairs they saw blood stains all over the floor. Was someone murdered there? For panned out in a second. Now they see a bunch of dead cats that have been dragged around this room and come to the realization it's their blood. That was all they had to see before running the frick out of there. Like, no. That would have been me before some serial killer in the back just like hits me like she was annoying. Coming in at number 5 is the ice plant. This one was shared by Redditor Digital is 303, who was very into urban exploration as a teenager. See, I was more into Gossip Girl and reading than I was exploring abandoned buildings, but to each their own. I never judge. Outwardly. Now either way, there was this old ice plant near the user's house that had burned down 35 to 30 years beforehand, which is very ironic. You're an ice plant and you burned it down. Bit of shocking behavior. Either way, the place was super overgrown, and as the user was exploring the mangled concrete and rebar, everything seemed just normal and old and burned. Disappointed, the user went home, but a few days later they hear that a corpse was pulled out of the plant by the police. The user had literally walked past a dead body and had no idea. Like, dude, open your eyes or your nose. How do you not smell a dead corpse? Apparently they smell like proper shit. Like, was your nose blocked that day, bro? What's going on? At number 4 is the cleanup. Abandoned mental hospitals are one place you will just absolutely never find me. Too much pain and suffering has been endured in these places, especially from the way they used to be treated. So this one comes from Reddit user Slothcopter, who said they explored this abandoned mental hospital that opened up sometime in the 1800s. They opened this freezer inside to find mold all over it and inside of it, and in the past they had used it to put dead bodies in there. So did those bodies mold? Did the mold come from something else? I don't know. Now in another hallway they found the word blood written in blood since they had it tested, and the word high written in spray paint, which clearly meant others had explored this place before this person did. Which is not surprising since urban explorers will literally do everything except like meth. Either way, the person decided to visit the place again a few days later, and when they did, the blood was mysteriously gone, but the high was still there. So who's coming in and out of this place and leaving messages in blood and then cleaning them up? Filling at number 3 slot is the Sprinter. This one comes from a now deleted Reddit user who went to explore an abandoned school in his town with a few of his friends. It was really hard to get into since the whole thing was boarded up, but they managed to climb up a pipe on the side of the school and get in through a window. They checked out the basement first that had been flooded, so it was very eerie just watching the stairs disappear underwater. They then checked out the gym, and as they were leaving it, they heard single footsteps coming from the other side of the gym door. Now that scared the shit out of them since this person or thing was blocking their roof exit, trajectory. The person sounded like they were just periodically walking around and then stopping, not even properly exploring. There was no light where they were coming from, which spooked the group even more. The group decided to hide out for a bit, and after seeing no one in the hallways, they decided to make a break for the roof exit door. As soon as they did, they heard someone sprinting after them, not even that far behind them. They ran the hell up those stairs and managed to get out without getting caught or killed by whoever was in there. Bro, why were you in there alone, you creep? Now at number 2 is quitting your job. This one was effed and came from Redditor Takausin, who said this happened around 13 years ago. As an electrician, him and his partner were sent out to this restoration project for a house that was built in the early 1900s. Now when they got there, they were told some info about the house, like how it had 2 owners since it was built, and how the last one was this old woman who passed away a decade prior, and there was no one left in her family that could take it. So it was auctioned off to this young couple who wanted to modernize the whole place, which is very understandable. So they got to work installing things and had to open the attic hatch to find out it was very cramped as hell up there, and so only the tiniest worker could go up and replace the intake cable. Now the user was the smallest, obviously, so he went up there and could smell this old people smell, so he just assumed it was like her death smell, but it kept getting stronger. When he got up there fully, the stench was awful, and when he turned his flashlight on, to the left of him, he saw 5 cat carcasses, some partially eaten by insects or whatever eat corpses, and the others were just bones and rotten skin. The dude had just had his lunch break, so he threw up on the spot and actually quit his job after this project was done. That's scarring. And finally, at number 1 is the Asylum. This one actually scared me a bit in my seat, and it's not even like I sit at my desk in a room alone. There's people around me, I was just still scared because I'm small. Shared by Reddit user Daddy's Little Screamer, when she was 16, she and her friend decided to explore the abandoned asylum grounds near her house. Firstly, if I lived in a house near near Asylum grounds, I would force my parents to move. That's not happening from any angle. There was this one tower there that had been locked for what seemed like forever, but that day it wasn't, and at the top of the tower there was a light on, and they both heard a dog barking. Thinking a dog maybe accidentally got itself stuck in the tower, they looked up and were shocked. There's a silhouette in the window for sure, but it was a person's silhouette, not a dog's. The person was the one barking. Without even going into the tower, the girls ran away, and all they heard was this person call out "bye now" in a creepy sing-song voice. You guys know what's coming next, don't you? Oh hell no! Guys, this whole video was a hell no. No, 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 no. Abandoned houses, no.
Number 10. Richard Cabell. This man lived in Devon, England during the 1600s and was apparently a huge dirtbag. He would torment people in his town and even abuse his wife. One night, in a violent rage, he struck his wife and she tried to escape. He then hunted her down and killed her and her dog. We all know what happens next. People believe that he felt he had the freedom to treat everyone horribly because he made a deal with the devil for immortality. But he did eventually die on July 5th, 1677. After he died, there were reports of a ghostly figure walking around the gravesite. This freaked out the locals so much, so they put a giant slab of stone on top of his grave, as well as encased the tomb with metal bars. And it was said that at night you could see a ghostly figure that kind of looked like a beast with glowing red eyes. Some people thought that it was Satan looking for the soul that belonged to him. Number 9. The Carpenter. The devil's weaved into history in so many different places. This ancient tale comes from a village called Tyrol in Austria. The legend has it that the locals had a well-traveled bridge that they used to cross from their village to a village called Schruns. One day, the bridge was destroyed in a massive flood. The villagers were very distressed, so they got help from a local carpenter. They told him that if he could rebuild the bridge in 3 days, they would pay him a huge amount of money. He knew such a task would be impossible, so he asked the villagers if he could have a day to think about it in order to come up with a solution. That night, when he was trying to find a way to build the bridge in such a short period of time, he was visited by a man with a little green hat. I love how these stories just have some creepy dude that shows up to your house in the middle of the night, and you're like, I wonder what he wants. Couldn't be anything bad. Well, the little man told the carpenter that he would build the bridge for him, and he could keep all the money. The only thing he wanted in return was the soul from the first person to leave this house and cross the bridge. The carpenter knew this was the devil, so he had a plan. The next day, the bridge was built and the carpenter showed up. The devil saw him there and was jumping in excitement to get his prize. Then, the carpenter pushed a goat onto the bridge and said, "Here's your soul." You got played, dude. Legend says the devil took the goat and people started roasting him as he was walking around with the goat. People were like, "Hey, you should have read the fine print. Oh, you two look like a great couple." I just love the idea of people roasting the devil. Like, oh, Prince of Darkness can't trick a tradesman. Number 8. George Lucans. Back in the day, if you got sick, you kind of had two options. You either got sicker and died, or you could go to a church and get an exorcism. On May 31st, 1788, George Lucans wasn't feeling too hot. He had started having convulsions, and it was reported that he would yell in a voice that didn't sound human. So he went to the doctor, but after trying almost everything, the doctors couldn't cure him of whatever his ailment was. So he had plan B. He went to see Reverend Easterbrook to get his soul washed. The Reverend tried to help George, but it seemed that what was tormenting him was too strong for just him. So he brought in 6 other priests to perform a super exorcism. The 7 of them took their combined power to cleanse George. During the process, he changed through 7 different demonic personalities, one of which claimed to be the devil. After the super exorcism, George was cured. And probably didn't live past 35 because that's how life went back then. Number 7. The Codex Gigantes. Would you read a book that might have been written by the devil? I think that one's a hard pass for me. I'll stick to reading the back of cereal boxes. Well, the Codex Gigantes is said to have the devil's actual handwriting, and whoever reads it becomes cursed. Why would you read that? I don't know if I believe that the devil's handwriting is in the book, but I wouldn't want to be wrong just for some light reading. The story goes that back in 1523, Ludovico Spoletano wanted to make the best spaghetti ever, so he summoned the devil. Nah, I'm just kidding. He wanted to answer a series of questions he'd been asked. Exam season is very tough. It's documented that the devil possessed him, grabbed a pen, and started writing. Most of the text has never been decoded except for one sentence that says, "I think it smells like updog." Number 6. Through the Window. This one was written by Redditor Gayreka. It's a story his father told him about when his dad was growing up. He said that when his dad and uncle were younger, his uncle was a bit of a rebellious kid. Never listened, would stay up late, draw dicks on everything. His father told him that it was a big problem, that his uncle was constantly challenging authority and would get in fights with his parents all the time. Well, one night, the whole family heard a blood-curdling scream come from his uncle's room. The family rushed in there and his uncle was freaking out. He said there was a man standing outside his window. Their father went to check for someone but couldn't find anything. His uncle describes the man as wearing a long trench coat and having no face except for glowing red eyes. After this, his uncle was as sweet as pie, became a respectful member of society. So was this a devil encounter? Or was this a story a father told his son so he wouldn't act up? That's healthy parenting. Scare him psychologically, but he'll be a good kid. Number 5, Michael Scott.
No, God!
Not the hilarious character from The Office, Michael Scott was a Scottish mathematician born in 1175 and is considered one of the most brilliant men to come out of Scotland. He traveled through Europe and eventually ended up in Italy. While in Italy, his brilliance didn't go unnoticed. He gained the attention of Emperor Frederick II. Frederick brought Michael into his court as the head astrologer. But when you're a super smart guy back then, people get a little suspicious. It's said he could summon demons to do his bidding, and they would go all over the world to bring him delicacies. And that's just where his power started. There's myths of him defeating a coven of witches that he turned into stone. It's even said he changed the course of the river Steeds. But the most famous one is him summoning the devil to build a road to his castle. His father had just built a shiny new castle and it needed a road. I mean, you don't want to be the only castle in the neighborhood without a road. Like, what do people think? So he called the devil and many demons to build a road for him. He could have just hired contractors. He owed the devil his soul and foresaw that the devil would kill him by dropping a rock on his head. So he always wore a metal cap.
Clever girl.
But one day, he took off his metal cap when entering a church, and a rock fell on his head and killed him. They get you when you least expect. Number 4. John Dee. John Dee was born in 1527 on July 13th. He was an Elizabethan mathematician and astrologer, but he also liked to dabble in the occult. He was into some pretty freaky stuff. Even though he was researching black magic behind closed doors, he managed to work his way up as a man of intellect, becoming the royal astrologer for Queen Mary. However, his little secrets caught up with him, and he was arrested for heresy in 1555. How do you get caught for something back then? The only way you would find out would be if you told people. Like, how was your weekend? Pretty good, you know, sacrificed a goat to the Dark Lord. Anyways, when he got out, he kept digging into the occult. In 1582, he claimed to contact the spirit world. People weren't a fan of this, so he had to move up north to the Manchester Collegiate Church. You can go visit his office to this day. There's the desk that he worked at with a giant burn mark in it. It's said that it's the devil's footprint. I would be pissed. I work all this time to summon the devil. He shows up and he puts his feet on my furniture. Number 3, Robert Johnson. Become one of the greatest musicians who ever lived, and people are going to start rumors about you. Robert Johnson is one of the most talented and influential blues musicians who has ever walked the earth. And a big myth about him is that he sold his soul to the devil to become as great as he did. As the story goes, he was walking down a highway and came across a man that offered him the ability to play the blues like no one has ever done before, but it would cost him his soul. Robert was like, yeah, I'll do that. I mean, what is a soul really? It's like a concept or like whatever. Well, Robert went down in history for his amazing skills and died suspiciously at 27. Number 2, Nino Paganini. Said to be the greatest violinist who ever lived. Seemed to be a common theme that back in the day, if you were great at something, they probably thought you sold your soul to the devil. No, it can be that you have like a natural gift and you work super hard, you just made a deal. Well, the same speculation goes for Niccolo. He was an Italian violinist like none other. He was so gifted that he would surpass anyone who ever taught him. He was touring at 15 and probably got hit on a lot. Part of why people probably thought that he had sold his soul to the devil was that he looked so ghoulish. He was tall, skinny, had pale skin, long black hair. He was kind of like a hot Edward Scissorhands. People would even say that they could see the devil hold his violin while he played. I think they were just jealous. Number 1, George Whitefield. Now this one is my favorite for sure. George was a traveling evangelist. He wandered around trying to get people hyped on God. I mean, we've all seen these guys.
Do it, Jesus! A brand new hit. Bam, 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 bam.
In In 1740, George was in Ipswich, Massachusetts. He was putting on a banger show. Like, people were going nuts. Apparently, the sermon was so hot and he was bashing the devil so hard that the devil showed up and was like, "You talking?" And George was like, "Yeah, I'm talking." And then he fought the devil. This is like an episode of Maury. George then summoned the holy power to push the devil out, and after that, the devil fell off a cliff and landed on one foot. He's got like a +10 on acrobatics. It's said that the devil's footprint is there to this day. The devil is probably at home like, "Dude, I don't even know you. Why are you talking so much smack?" Well,
starting off our list today, we have a 2018 UFO sighting that took place in the skies above North Carolina. Shout out to anyone watching from Elon University. In August of 2018, a man named Javon Hill claims to have spotted a UFO while driving home on US 74 just southwest of Charlotte. He described seeing lights in the clouds above him, shaped like a square. Immediately, he pulled out his phone and began snapping photos, which I have to admit are pretty convincing. After hovering in the sky above Javon for a good amount of time, the illuminated formation just vanished into thin air, as they do. You know how it is. It was as though it had never existed in the first place, but of course it did because there's proof, and we've seen it. And Hill, who says he was never a believer in aliens before that night, claims that during the time in which the object was hovering above him, he was seriously concerned for his safety.
On June 24th, 1947, Kenneth Arnold, a private pilot, saw something in the sky near Mount Rainier in Washington, something that he couldn't quite explain. He described 9 strange crescent-shaped objects flying in a V formation. What really caught his attention was how fast these things were moving, at around 1,700 miles per hour, which was faster than any known aircraft at the time. And when Arnold reported what he saw, it ended up getting massive media coverage. The Kenneth Arnold sighting is often referenced as the first big UFO encounter in modern times. After Arnold's sighting, lots of other reports started coming in about strange things in the sky across the United States. The government and military were getting intrigued, and the US Air Force started Project Sign, which was the first official government investigation into UFOs. This later became Project Blue Book, which looked into thousands of UFO sightings to try and figure out what was going on. So is it just one of these cases where he saw something and then everybody else started like getting excited and, just thought they were seeing things? Or was this just the time where UFOs and aliens were starting to come down to investigate things here on Earth?
Next up, we have 2 commercial pilots on different aircrafts claiming to have seen a mysterious flying object in the sky while flying above Arizona on February 24th of 2018. The first pilot to spot the UFO called into radio traffic control to ask if another plane had passed by him. The controller answered no, and then went on to make a joke about the pilot having possibly seen a UFO. Ground control then contacted another pilot flying an American Airlines flight a little bit behind the first plane, and asked the pilot to inform the control center if an aircraft were to pass over the plane. And a short while later, the pilot did exactly that. He said that a fast object had flown 3,000 feet over his plane in the opposite direction of which he was going. Once again, ground control had no knowledge of the aircraft, and it didn't show up on any of the radars either. Both pilots later described the objects as illuminated and incredibly fast, saying that they were nothing like the weather balloons they had seen sometimes floating at that altitude before. Plus, there were no records of this object, so what could it have been? Well, a UFO, duh.
Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was the lead investigator of Project Blue Book in the 50s. His job was to investigate reports of UFOs and find any possible explanation for them. Of course, if there was none, it would be categorized as a genuine UFO. French had shot down a lot of UFO reports over the course of his career, but in 1952, he witnessed something himself, something he could only describe as a genuine alien encounter. He kept what he'd seen a secret for decades. It wasn't until 2013 that he testified before 6 former members of Congress in DC, describing an event that happened back in 1952. A number of residents off the coast of St. John's, Newfoundland, had reported spotting 2 unidentified flying objects. so French was tasked with heading over to Canada to basically debunk it. The UFOs had crashed into the water, and when Lieutenant Colonel French arrived, he saw this crowd of about 100 people, including some police, standing by a wharf, gawking at something in the water. French made his way over, and when he looked down into the clear water below, he saw what looked like two large circular aircraft-like objects, and there were apparently two beings working on them. French described the creatures as, quote, 2 to 3 feet tall, light gray in color, very thin, long arms with either 2 or 3 fingers, the top of their heads much wider than their jawline. Their eyes were very slanted, and you couldn't see pupils in them. He then described the objects slowly rising out from the water before abruptly accelerating and taking off into the sky.
Next up, we have the very first record of a UFO encounter to take place in New England, USA, which I bet you didn't know was actually a major hotspot for extraterrestrial UFO and UAP activity. That's unidentified aerial phenomena, for those of you who don't know. The first recorded sighting happened in Boston, New England, and it was also the first ever documented sighting in the US as a whole. It took place in 1639, and credible reports have been popping up ever since. The record was a second-hand observation recorded by colony founder and governor at the time, John Winthrop, who wrote that a sober, discreet man had seen the sky above Boston become illuminated by a green light while he was rowing his boat along the river one evening. The light was still for a moment and appeared to be flaming, and then it morphed its shape and darted off into the night sky towards Charlestown. The encounter lasted for 3 hours, with the object in the sky going higher into the air and then rushing down closer to Earth again and again, back and forth. By the time it ended, which it did when the object just disappeared into the night, the man along with his boatmates had traveled 1 mile upstream with absolutely no memory of how they had gotten there.
This next one has to be the wildest alien encounter case in recent history. So in March of 2023, something strange went down in a small Bolivian village called Horania. It all started with reports of a mysterious green light hovering in the sky. People whipped out their phones to capture the event, having no idea what the hell they were looking at. But unlike a lot of your typical UFO cases, this one doesn't just end with people seeing something strange in the sky. Things get way weirder. So 2 days later, residents claimed to have seen tiny beings darting around the town at night. One villager, Rita Marquez, described them as little and almost like goblins. Some locals even claimed to have found one of these small creatures dead in a gutter one morning, only for its body to vanish soon after. So, a lot to unpack here. Strange lights, possible aircraft, little beings running around the streets at night, and even a mysterious disappearance of one of these dead creatures. I don't know what to make of this case. Whenever there's a whole bunch of witnesses like this, I find it very interesting though.
Next up, we have Barney and Betty Hill's extraterrestrial encounter, which took place on September 19th of 1961 in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where the couple claimed to have been abducted by aliens. The ordeal started when the pair saw a bright light in the sky around 10:30 p.m. while driving home after a night out. Betty asked Barney to stop the car so that they could get a better look. He did, and then pulled out a pair of binoculars. What they saw was a massive, oddly shaped spacecraft with multicolored lights. They tried to drive away, but the spaceship, which they believed to have been at least 40 feet long, followed them, getting closer and closer until it was hovering directly in front of the pair's car. Barney claims he was able to clearly make out 6 to 8 humanoid figures standing on the ship who instructed Barney and Betty not to move, but rather to just keep looking towards the ship. The next thing the pair remembered, they had driven 35 miles away from their destination with no recollection of doing so. They tried to write down as much as they could about the experience on their way home, but their memories quickly became fragmented. It wasn't until years later, under hypnosis, that the pair separately both recalled being taken onto the ship and then separated from one another and examined by the humanoid alien life forms. In the days after the incident, however, both Betty and Barney's watches stopped working, and Barney noticed tiny, circles on the back of his truck, and when he put his compass near them, it went haywire. So, I'm not saying they were telling the truth, but I think they might have been telling the truth.
This next story is very outlandish, but it's an entertaining story, and I haven't talked about it before, so here it goes. Back in 2021, Angelina Lynn Johnston held a news conference in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Johnston claims to be a former retired defense intelligence officer who had an encounter with various alien species at a secret base in the Mojave Desert. She claimed that in January of 2010, a few years before she ran as a Democrat candidate for South Dakota Senate, she had met up with a couple in South Carolina who ended up taking her to this secret base. She didn't provide details on exactly where the base was in the desert, but said that she would be taking an astronaut along with a few scientists to the base, which had been built into the side of a mountain. She described seeing various alien species, including one that looked a bit like a praying mantis type creature, and that the beings all spoke to her through telepathy.
Next up, we have the Exitor Incident, which took place in Exeter, New Hampshire in 1965 and actually inspired a best-selling novel, Incident at Exeter: Unidentified Flying Objects Over America Now, by John G. Fuller. Not sponsored. One evening in Exeter, a police officer patrolling Highway Route 101 stopped to check on a woman parked on the side of the road. When he asked her what was wrong, she answered in breathless hysterics. She claimed that a large red flying object with flashing lights had been chasing her. Just a few hours later, the police heard a similar story from another man, a hitchhiker who claimed to have seen 5 bright lights in the sky while walking along Route 150. He told officers that they had been about 100 feet away from where he had stood, and he watched as they hovered over a home before moving over to the airspace above a large field, and then disappearing and reappearing several times. Curious, one of the policemen went with the hitchhiker back to the spot where he claimed to have seen the UFOs, and sure enough, there it was. And another officer arrived shortly after to see the exact same thing. 5 bright lights high up in the sky disappearing into and reappearing from the trees over and over again. And then, over the next few weeks, authorities in Exeter received almost 60 other reports of UFO sightings in the area. So, if you like aliens and UFOs and Exeter was not on your bucket list, you might want to rethink that decision.
Finally, we have a case where 3 UFOs hijacked a pilot's plane in midair. This is about as disturbing a close encounter as it gets, as this man just narrowly escaped death. The pilot's name is Carlos de los Santos. In 1975, he'd been flying back to Mexico City. It was just another routine flight until it wasn't. Carlos spotted something on his right wing. It was this silver disc-like object about 13 feet in length. It was just right on top of the wing. Then he saw an identical object on top of his left wing. And as if that wasn't enough, a third object appeared, and this one was heading straight for him. In a panic, Carlos tried to steer his plane away, but the controls weren't responding. Luckily, the object just missed him though. He frantically radioed air traffic control, explaining that he'd lost control and was surrounded by these strange disc objects. And then, to his complete and utter horror, the plane suddenly veered completely off course. It was now ascending higher and higher up into the sky. Carlos had absolutely no control over the plane now. But then, just as suddenly as they appeared, the strange objects flew away. And miraculously, thankfully, Carlos regained control of the aircraft.
At number 10, we have J for Zinna in the Austrian Caves. If the show Planet Earth has taught me anything, it's that caves are dark and beautiful ecosystems that are teeming with life. And in this video, there's a shot of some of that life that seems to be something I've never seen before. In this video, J for Zinna is on a little hiking trip in Austria. She's with a whole group, so it seems like she should be pretty safe. Unless you're the one person on the tour who they forget and then you get stuck in the cave and then you're like on the side of a mountain for the rest of your life getting attacked by bears. That could happen. Well, this mountain tour leads to a cave and then they start to check it out. Caves are really one of the marvels of the world. Just then she's surprised by some sort of creature.
There's someone climbing up the wall. It's an iceman. It's a ghost. Jesus, what is that? Do you see that? Oh my God.
What the hell is that thing? It looks like some sort of lizard man working its way up the wall with ease. It's really far away, so it's super hard to tell what this thing is or how big it is, but it's some sort of beast man living in the cave, climbing up the walls. That's what it looks like. I'm gonna say just let this thing be and don't bother checking it out. At number 9 we have the Rea Tunnels Creature. So during World War II, the Germans wanted to build some sort of tunnels in the Owl Mountains, all the way over in Poland. Why did they want to do this? Well, we have no idea. Hitler was into all sorts of weird stuff. He had troops out there looking for magical artifacts. I guess if he won the war, he wanted to be a part-time warlock. Well, some people not so long ago wanted to go check out these tunnels to see what was going on in them, and they were in for a bit of a shock. This group of dudes was walking through when they saw this. Here's another man just running around in caves, I guess. Is there a whole world of things underneath us that we don't know about? That thing did look kinda like a humanoid. It looks like it was running around on 2 legs, but obviously it was moving very fast because by the time they turned the corner to look at it, it was gone. At number 8 we have Satan's Cave. Well, if you're a kid growing up in Minneapolis, I can imagine you get bored really quick, so finding a cave to walk around in probably sounds better than smoking weed in the park with all your friends and complaining about your mom. Now this group of kids went into some caves underneath Minneapolis in search of what's called Satan's Cave. They end up walking through what kind of looks like a sewer with a bunch of graffiti on the walls and some strange demonic faces that have been carved all over the place. Now this is super strange, but they want to get to Satan's Cave, so they continue past the demonic Art Deco. Eventually they get to a tunnel that heads straight down so far you can't see the bottom of it. This could be what they were looking for, but naturally they were like, screw this, and decide to turn back and exit the cave. Probably a smart move. At number 7 we have Train Tunnel Surprise. So what's a tunnel and what's a cave? It's kind of like a tomato-tomato situation. They're both holes in the ground where everything is dark and spooky. So I'm probably gonna throw a few tunnels on this list, and I don't care what you guys say because who cares? It's a tunnel or a cave, it doesn't matter. Well, a bunch of teens thought it would be a good idea to try and walk through a train tunnel in the middle of the night. These tunnels are right next to Odell Lake in Oregon, and usually there's large transport trains moving through them. Well, guess what happened while they were crossing through? A train showed up. Yeah, who would have thought of that? A train coming along train tracks? Well, these kids had to jump off the tracks and press themselves against the walls while standing in some gross swamp water so the train didn't run them over. Luckily, nobody was hurt. Alright guys, at number 6 we have Lost. Okay, getting lost in a cave is one thing. You could probably last for at least a few days until people found you. But getting lost in a cave underwater while you're free diving, you have minutes before your air runs out. Well, Kodiak Moraski was doing some sport fishing while free diving. He was chasing down a little lobster and then got a little too far into a cave. This got him all turned around and he couldn't find his way out. He started to panic, but luckily he was able to find which way he came in. I guess the scary encounter in this cave was almost drowning to death.
You're fine, just breathe off the rig, Tina.
I gotta get some.
Put the regulator in your mouth.
Wow, I don't know what's going on.
At number 5 we have Nick in the Caves. Okay, this one has got a lot going on. This starts with a Russian YouTuber named Nick. He's got a channel where he explores creepy caves and places like that. On one episode, he decides to explore some old Russian caves with some friends. While exploring, he gets into a section that is so tight he has to take his backpack off and leave it behind. And then he gets separated from his friends. He explores a bit without his stuff and then comes to some strange sections. There's a part with a jug, it's set up to catch water, but it's like, who is that for? This is in a cave in the middle of nowhere. Eventually he's freaked out and he heads back the way he came. He gets back to his backpack and he sees that it's been opened and his stuff is scattered everywhere. Who or what did this? While he's collecting his things, you can see a pair of eyes in the reflection of the camera. He doesn't see this until he reviews the footage, but you can see these dark eyes peering at him through the darkness. It's very creepy. My hair is standing up just talking about it. At number 4 we have Big Ol' Spider. Alright, this one is simple. Mikhail Krosberg was in a cave in Laos and then he found a giant spider. He said it was as big as a pizza. That's super gross. This thing is so big it looks like it could eat a pug. Honestly, to be number 4 on the list, that's all you need. You don't need to be something supernatural or like some demon from another dimension. It just needs to be a super gross spider because I think they're disgusting and I don't want anything to do with them. That's how you get number 4 on this list. At number 3, we have the Cave of Screaming Terror. Okay, right off the bat, you call a place the Cave of Screaming Terror, and I'm not going to visit. I don't think anyone in their right mind would think this is a fun place to check out. While you're at it, why don't you go check out the House of the Soul Suckers, or the Forest of Getting Kicked in the Nuts? Well, this one dude went for a swim in the cave because most of the cave is submerged, so if you're gonna go inside you have to swim. And he doesn't even bring a boat to go in, he's just straight up swimming in it. That's asking for some cave creature to pull you down and rip your insides out. The dude swimming was Donnell Buckley, and while he was going for his nice little float through the cave, he started to hear this. I don't know if that's a bird or whatever that could be, but whatever it is, Donnell didn't want to figure out where it was coming from, and he beelined it out of there. Good idea. At number 2, we have MJ in the Cave. The ghost of Michael Jackson was attacking people in a cave, and it was all caught on camera. Nah, I'm just lying to you guys, because that's fun for me. We're not talking about the famous pop star Michael Jackson. We're talking about the YouTuber Mark Johnson, of course. He was exploring the Cave of the Winds in Colorado when several paranormal encounters happened. First, we have this weird noise that kinda sounds like a ghost farting or dropping a massive turd.
Probably kick on the spirit box here in a minute and that other
Do you think you still have to crap in the afterlife? Do you believe in ghost poops? Please, let us know your thoughts in the comments. It's not long after this that we see another paranormal encounter. An orb! I don't know much about ghosts because I don't spend my time watching ghost hunters. I've got better things to do, like literally anything else. But those orbs are supposed to be ghosts walking around doing like ghost stuff, like slamming doors and watching you sleep. Okay, you guys, we're on to number 1 now. And the number 1 spot on our list goes to an account from a park-wearing dog. Oh, he's so cute. You guys have probably seen this dog all over the internet. His name is Tret, he's a pit bull, and he can climb trees and do all sorts of cool stunts. Well, one day his owner was taking this good old boy out for a walk when he came across an old well. A well is basically a cave, it's just like sticking in a different direction. You guys know, wells are still in the theme of caves, especially if they're old and abandoned. Tret's owner hears something weird coming out of the well, so he decides to take a cool little video, and then we see this happen.
В колодце что-то шипит. Может, ужик.
What the hell is that? It definitely doesn't look like something that should be hanging out in a forest. It looks like something that came out of the gates of hell. But let me know what you guys think of this thing in the comments, and let me know if you thought this one was deserving of the number 1 spot.
Starting off today, we are talking about the dark story of Richard Walter Bradley, whose tale is terrifying and set in the eerie woods around Auburn, Washington. Bradley, a 40-year-old with a knack for manipulation and a dark side, drew people into the forest with tales of buried gold from an old robbery. But, unfortunately, the reality was far more sinister. In a terrifying series of events, he became linked to the grim discovery of several bodies in secluded, forested areas. Bradley's grim saga began to unravel when police found the body of Brandy Blake, a 44-year-old woman last seen with him in the Game Farm Wilderness. Her demise was due to blunt force trauma, and nearby, authorities found additional human remains belonging to Emilio Maturin, identified through DNA testing. Emilio, who had been missing since 2019, was lured into the woods by Bradley with a false promise of gold, only to meet a very tragic end. The story gets darker with the mysterious disappearance of Michael Goman and his son Vance Lakely. Both were found with their lives taken in a remote, unmaintained road near the same forest, their bodies discovered a week apart. Bradley's connection to their deaths became clear when his wife was caught driving Goman's Durango, which he later plotted to destroy to erase any ties to the crime. This string of chilling encounters in the woods, centered around Bradley's deceptions and brutal actions, paints a picture of a man who turned the tranquility of the forest into a backdrop for his heinous acts. Next, we are talking about this story from Dr. Jim Danger, and it is one call that was way too close for comfort. When they were about 18, a group of friends decided to venture deep into the Apalachicola National Forest near Tallahassee, Florida for some some car camping and to enjoy a few ice-cold beverages away from the watchful eyes of park rangers. They set up their camp and indulged in the typical antics of teenagers. Later, two of them went exploring and found themselves about 100 yards from their site across the main road and down another path. They immediately noticed signs that someone had been staying there for a while, large bags of trash and other belongings scattered around. Curiosity got the best of them and they stumbled upon an older man living out of his van surrounded by clotheslines and coolers with a beautiful golden retriever by his side. The man was very friendly, chatting about various spots in the park and giving directions in steps rather than yards or miles. He swayed as he walked, not quite stumbling, but as if he was balancing on a tightrope. The encounter felt very odd, especially the man's keen interest on discussing national parks and forests from their hometown. 2 months later, the chilling truth came to light. One of the friends saw a news report featuring an old man with a van and a golden retriever, the same man that they had met. This man was Gary Michael Hilton, convicted of several heinous acts, including the disappearance of a young woman on Blood Mountain, Georgia, and an older couple in Pisgah, North Carolina, and another woman in the very parts of the forest that they had visited. Shocked by the realization, they contacted the authorities, and they were soon working with the FBI, flying back to help investigators pinpoint locations and share details of their encounter. It was only after the trial they learned that investigators had found what seemed to be human remains near the campsite, a very grim reminder of their narrow escape from a dangerous man in the forest. Next, we are talking about the man in the mask. This story comes from Reddit user JWhite56, and it starts off during a winter break in North Dakota when they, a college freshman at the time, decided to walk home alone from a friend's basement gathering at around 3 a.m. Already bad news. As they made their way through the snowy wooded path under the moonlight, they suddenly noticed a figure about 75 yards away moving in the opposite direction. Startled by each other's presence, the student laughed nervously and waved, hoping to break the tension. However, the stranger, clad in a full-face ski mask and towering in height, just stood there, staring back without a word. In the eerie silence of the desolate woods, a chilling fear took over the student. Feeling a primal urge to escape, they turned and hurried home as fast as they could. The thought of the masked man following them sent them into a sprint, fueled by a mix of adrenaline and remnants of the night's festivities. This terrifying encounter in the silent, frosty forest left them vowing never to revisit those woods or walk alone at night there again, haunted by the memory of that unsettling stare and the fear of being pursued through the snow. Next, we have a story from the Redditor One Macabre Cat, and they wrote about a time when they were young and camping with a summer program. On the trip, they expected a typical night filled with s'mores, hot cocoa, and campfire stories, but ended up with a lot more than they bargained for. Tucked into their tents by 11 p.m., 3 of the boys stayed up chatting, immersed in the typical late-night banter of people their age. Suddenly, the night's calm was shattered by the sound of heavy, labored breathing just outside their tent, as if someone had been running for a long time and couldn't catch their breath. Initially dismissing it as their imagination or just a sleeping camper nearby, the boys froze when a frail voice broke the silence, pleading, "Please help me." The voice sounded like an elderly man struggling for air. It was unfamiliar and very unsettling. The bravest of the trio cautiously peeked outside, flashlight in hand, revealing only the lower half of what appeared to be the man's scabbed and pale legs. It seemed as if he had been wandering the forest without clothes for quite some time. As they watched in horror, the man begged for help again, but refused the suggestion to seek a ranger, cryptically whispering, "No, no rangers. They keep me here." At that moment, one of the chaperones thankfully emerged, his flashlight slicing through the darkness, and asked the man about his condition and how long he'd been out there. Instead of responding, the man just broke down sobbing and then disappeared into the woods, his emaciated figure a ghostly sight as he faded into the night. Next, we are talking about the mysterious figure. This harrowing story comes from a Reddit user who has since deleted their account, but this story left me with such a chilling feeling after reading it. They wrote, quote, "I was solo camping and was on a hike to my favorite spot. I saw what looked like a man holding a massive rock in one hand and a knife in the other facing me. This was pretty weird, but other bushcrafters have been known to camp there too, so I gave the standard 'hey man' shout and wave. I got a bit closer and it looked like it was just a rock. I laughed it off and turned around, starting to walk away. A rock whizzed by my right ear fast enough and big enough to really hurt me if it hit me. I turned around to where the rock had come from and the figure I'd seen wasn't there anymore. Definitely enough for me to turn right around and literally never enter the woods ever again after that. Alright, glad that's settled. Next we have this very creepy story about being watched. It comes from Border Trilogy, and they wrote about a time while camping deep in the forests of Maine when they and their partner experienced a chill encounter that left them uneasy for days. They loved the solitude of backpacking far from civilization, often sleeping under the stars or in a small tent, but one morning as the husband sat outside their tent putting on his boots while his wife slept inside, he noticed a man standing about 30 feet away staring intensely at him. The stranger had the eerie demeanor of someone who definitely didn't belong there, alone and far from any trail. Joking nervously, the husband greeted him, half expecting a friendly reply. Instead, the man continued to stare for a few seconds before turning and disappearing silently back into the woods. For the remainder of their trip, the couple felt the shadow of that encounter, half expecting the mysterious man to reappear at any moment. They pondered over who he might be and what strange set of circumstances led to him stumbling upon their remote campsite at dawn. This unsettling meeting in the quiet of the forest reminded them that sometimes the most disturbing mysteries are those with no answers, only echoes in the trees and the feeling of being watched. Next we are talking about this story that comes from the Reddit user Ernst Egret, and it starts off about 14 years ago when a group of adventurous cousins stumbled upon the eerie remains of an old, burned out house in the forest. With the reckless curiosity of youth, they decided to explore the ruins. Inside, they found nothing but charred debris and junk. However, the real chill came when they discovered a cellar entrance outside. Despite the darkness beckoning them below, a growing sense of unease prevented them from venturing down. Instead, they disturbed the silence by kicking dirt into the abyss and walked away. Their retreat was short-lived, however. Mere yards from the house, one of the cousins froze, certain he heard something. The group stopped and listened. There was indeed a sound, like something clambering up the rotten cellar stairs. Peering back, they saw a dark, fuzzy shape emerge from the cellar they had left open. Initially, it seemed like a large dog, but terror struck when the creature stood on two legs. In a frantic dash, the cousins scattered in all directions, each convinced the beast was hot on their trail. One of them ran through a thicket of briars in his panic, tearing his arms and legs, which led to a scolding when he got home. Classic, you know, you're in trouble when you're fearing for your life. Though they all escaped unharmed, the memory of that horrifying figure ensured they steered clear of the deep woods for a long time afterwards. And next we are talking about the Night Marchers. User Truvin wrote about while camping in Pololu Valley on Hawaii's Big Island, where a group of campers had an experience that left them questioning their disbelief in the local lore. After a restless night dealing with a couple of large centipedes near their tent, they decided to leave in the early hours around 3 to 4 a.m. As they neared the top of the valley and paused for a break, they looked out across several rugged valleys along the coast far beyond their campsite. To their astonishment, they saw 15 to 20 flickering torchlights moving slowly along the jagged cliff edges. These areas are known to be accessible only to experienced hikers, yet here were these mysterious figures navigating the treacherous paths in the dark with old-fashioned torches rather than modern headlamps. This eerie sighting brought to the mind the legend of the Hawaiian Night Marchers, ghostly apparitions of ancient Hawaiian warriors who are said to roam the islands. According to the lore, these spirits march in large processions, carrying torches and beating drums as they trace their old battle paths or sacred routes. Encountering them is considered an omen, and locals believe that meeting the gaze of a night marcher can bring misfortune or even compel the onlooker to march with them forever. Despite their skepticism, the campers couldn't find a logical explanation for what they saw, and they left the valley with more questions than answers, their minds swirling with the haunting images of what might very well have been the night marchers continuing their eternal patrol. Next, we are talking talking about a creepy alien encounter. Dashboard for Fire wrote about a time when they were young while playing alone in their room around 11 p.m. They witnessed something unforgettable that ventured out from the woods behind their house. Initially, they thought the figure approaching their sliding glass door was a neighbor due to its similar height. However, as it drew nearer, it became clear that this was no human. With its dark black appearance and rounded head reminiscent of aliens from classic films, and standing about 6 feet tall with a very thin body, this figure was unmistakably non-human. It stopped at the glass, staring in at them for what seemed like an eternity, though it was only a few seconds. The proximity left no room for doubt. This was not a human. After a short stare down, the creature turned and walked away with long strides, disappearing from view. They ran to scream for their mom, who didn't believe their story, and then they had to go back to sleep in that same room, haunted by the memory of the encounter. Now, as an adult, they still get chills and tear up thinking about the event. What disturbed them the most was the creature's calm demeanor. It approached and left slowly, as if it was just observing. While they believe in aliens, they find it hard to accept that one might visit Earth. The incident, which seems straight out of a sighting of what many call a gray alien, has left them deeply unsettled, struggling to reconcile their experience with their skepticism of extraterrestrial visits. Next, we are talking about this weird, mysterious sound. A few years ago, an archaeologist and their boss were deep in the forests of interior British Columbia, wrapping up some final checks on a survey site. They ventured far from civilization, following deactivated logging routes to a remote area where they had previously found an archaeological site. As they worked, the entire atmosphere of the forest seemed to shift, feeling unsettlingly strange. Suddenly, a bizarre and loud whomp sound echoed through the trees, a noise so powerful it pressured their ears and chests, making them feel as if they were being compressed by the air itself. The archaeologist looked over to see their boss, about 20 feet away, turned pale, staring back in absolute shock. When the sound struck again, chilling them to the bone and raising every hair on end, the boss immediately decided it was time to leave. They hastily packed their equipment and hurried back to their truck without a word. To this day, the archaeologist gets chills just thinking about it, and despite various theories, the source of that terrifying sound remains a mystery, reminiscent of the forceful whoosh of a large bird's wings, but far louder and more intense. To this day, there honestly hasn't been a very solid explanation of what that sound might have been.
Number 10. The Violinist. It's been long said that successful artists have made a deal with the devil, and this has been going on for hundreds of years. An Italian violinist named Giuseppe Tartini claimed the devil appeared to him in a dream and played for him the most incredible piece of music he had ever heard. Here is how he described the experience. One night in the year 1713, I dreamed I had made a pact with the devil for my soul. Everything went as I wished. My new servant anticipated my every desire. Among other things, I gave him my violin to see if he could play. How great was my astonishment on hearing a sonata so wonderful and so beautiful, played with such great art and intelligence as I had ever even conceived in my boldest flights of fantasy. Upon waking, Giuseppe tried to recreate it, and that became his magnum opus, known as the Devil's Trill Sonata. Number 9. Exorcism gone wrong. In 1997, Father Gabriel Amorth conducted his exorcisms in Rome, and he asked for the help of Jesus, and the young man he was dealing with began to curse and spit, and started using English instead of his native Italian. Screaming and howling, the demon burst forth and looked straight at him, drooling saliva from the young man's mouth. Father Gabriel said he returned fire with prayers and other ritual recitations, demanding that the demon reveal its name. He said, "Unclean spirit, whoever you are and all your companions who possess this servant of God, I command you, tell me your name, the day and the hour of your damnation." The man fixed him with a glare, snarled, and said, "I am Lucifer." Father Gabriel was shocked. He did not expect to receive such a terrifying response. The father mostly used prayers as his weapon, reciting verses of liberation from the Roman rite of exorcism. As Father Gabriel continually commanded the demon to leave the host, it eventually left, but my goodness, that sounds absolutely terrifying. Number 8. Witch trials. Sarah Good was one of the first 3 women to be accused of witchcraft in the Salem witch trials, which occurred in 1692 in Massachusetts. On March 25, 1692, Sarah was tried for witchcraft, and when she was brought in, the accusers immediately began to rock back and forth and moan, seemingly in response to Sarah's presence. Later in the trial, one of the accusers fell into a fit. Now, Sarah denied the allegations against her, but another woman on trial admitted to being the devil's servant. She stated that a tall man dressed in all black came to them, demanding they sign their names in a great book. Although initially refusing, she eventually wrote her name after Sarah, and another woman forced her to. When Sarah was allowed the chance to defend herself in front of the 12 jurors in the Salem Village Meeting House, she argued her innocence, proclaiming that the other 2 were the real witches. In the end, however, Sarah was convicted of witchcraft and sentenced to death. So, did she really meet the devil, or was she innocent? Who knows? Number 7. Strayed from the path. This is the testimony of Jennifer Perez, who was brought up in a Christian home. She strayed from that path, got into drugs, died, and was sent to hell. Fortunately, she was given a second chance, but this is her story. She was in the hospital and her spirit woke up, but her body didn't. As a spirit, 2 men dressed in red approached her and told her to come with them. She went to heaven and saw the Lord and 2 angels, Gabriel and Michael. She and Gabriel went through a black door, and it was dark and they were falling. The farther they fell, the hotter it was, and she said it smelled like sulfur. They got to the bottom and she realized that she was in hell, seeing people being tortured by various demons. The cries and torture scared her, and then she saw a massive red creature in the middle of it all, just watching everything. She assumed that this was the devil, and it terrified her. After this, she then ascended back to heaven and was asked for a second chance. She then woke up in the hospital, alive, and devoted the rest of her life to God. Number 6. Mom met the devil. A user on Reddit posted this story about the time their mother met the devil. They said, "My mom told me a story of when she met the devil. She was in high school, she had a friend who was dating an older man. He was probably 20 to 30 years older than her, and he gave her a necklace. Not wanting to get caught by her parents, she gave the necklace to my mom. She wore it, and that night when my mom slept, she dreamt of a man. Clean cut and handsome, but disturbingly evil. She said all she knew about the man was that he was pure evil. He came up to her face, eyes locked on her, stone cold and expressionless, reached for her neck and grabbed the necklace from her neck and twirled it in a circle in the air like a witch's pendant. She jolted awake and couldn't feel the necklace, and in a panic she looked all around for the necklace and found it under her pillow in a perfect spiral." Number 5. TikTok doctor. Once, a man who was pronounced dead by his doctor after being injured said that rather than seeing a bright light and the feeling of coming home, he instead saw hell itself and met the devil. A doctor took to TikTok to explain that he encountered a young man in his early 20s who had been stabbed in the heart after being involved in a deal that went wrong. Not willing to let the man die, medical staff took the victim into surgery, kept him from losing too much blood, and treated the wound in his heart. The doctor remembers the man waking up 4 hours later and crying, claiming that he went straight down to hell and looked straight in the eyes of the devil. The man said he could see the doctors working to save his life, and having never prayed before, gave it a try, at which point an angel pulled him back up out of hell. Remembering how clear the man had been, the doctor said it was the most amazing experience because he was legit. I mean, nobody makes up an experience like that. The last I heard, he's completely changed his life, he gave his life to God, and I still to this day, the look in his eyes when he woke up, the terror, I'm absolutely convinced he did meet the devil. Number 4. Working for the devil. Gilles de Rais was originally hailed a hero of France for his role in the 100 Years' War, a time during which he served as a comrade in arms to Joan of Arc, but the nobleman Gilles de Rais lived a secret, gruesome second life where he enjoyed ending the lives of people who couldn't defend themselves. In September 1440, de Rais was arrested after an almost decade-long spree in which he may have ended the lives of over 140 victims. During his trial, both de Rais and several of his servants/accomplices confessed to their evil deeds. Besides ending people's lives, he also admitted to engaging in Satanism by reportedly summoning the devil and his demonic demonic minions. While the nobleman refused to sell his soul, he offered the blood and organs of his victims in exchange for knowledge and power over the dark arts. Number 3. God wanted her to see hell. Josefa Menendez was a young Spanish sister who had a short religious life of great suffering and experienced many revelations throughout her life. More than once she was taken to hell to witness and feel the suffering firsthand. Sister Josefa was reluctant to write on the subject of hell, and did so only to conform to her Lord's wishes. She wrote about her experiences in her journal, and she described it as the greatest torment of hell, namely the soul's inability to love. She wrote, "One of these damned souls cried out, 'This is my torture, that I want to love and cannot. There is nothing left me but hatred and despair. If one of us could so much as make a single act of love, but we cannot, we live on hatred." As mentioned, she went to hell multiple times, but one time she saw the devil. She wrote, "Souls were crying out and the devil answered, 'Insinuate yourselves by including carelessness in them, but keep in the background so that you are not found out. Tempt these others into ambition, into self-interest, to acquiring wealth without working, whether it be lawful or not." That entry was from February 3rd, 1923. She visited hell many times after that, but didn't report on seeing the devil again. And that sounds absolutely terrifying. Number 2. In a coma. Will Carroll is a drummer who has been in the band Death Angel since 2009 and has provided the drum tracks for their last 4 studio albums. After spending nearly 2 weeks in a coma fighting Will revealed that during his battle with the virus, he saw the afterlife, where he would be sent to hell and meet Satan. The illness left him in a critical state where he was put on a ventilator while lying unconscious in a California Pacific Medical Center hospital bed for 12 days before recovering. He said that the devil would punish him for the deadly sin of sloth. The musician said Satan would transform him into a creature similar to that of Star Wars' Jabba the Hutt, and that he would vomit blood until he ultimately had a heart attack. Will told the San Francisco Chronicle that what he went through allowed him to change some of his typical lifestyle habits, including his once heavy alcohol and illegal substance use. "I'm also going to listen to satanic metal though," he joked, but he later admitted that after beating COVID-19, he doesn't think Satan's quite as cool as he used to. And coming up at number 1, The Devil Made Me Do It. Sound familiar? It's because the third Conjuring movie has the same title. This film is inspired by the real events that took place with Arnie Johnson. Ed and Lorraine Warren were helping exorcise a possessed boy named David Glatzel in the early 80s. David's family had seen him being beaten and choked by invisible hands, and that red marks had appeared on his neck afterwards. David had started to growl, hiss, speak in otherworldly voices, and recite passages from the Bible as well. They did many exorcisms on David, and Lorraine said that David levitated, ceased breathing for a time, and even demonstrated the supernatural ability of precognition. During his exorcisms, there was also a rocking chair in the room that would allegedly rock on its own, levitate, and even vanish and reappear. David and Lorraine also claimed to have seen the devil sitting in it. Arnie then coerced one of the demons to possess him while participating in one of David's exorcisms. Afterwards, Arnie's personality changed. He would fall into a trance-like state where he would growl and hallucinate, but later have no memory of it. Then one day, his and his girlfriend Debbie's landlord was drunk and misbehaving, so Ernie ended his life. The day after the incident, Lorraine Warren informed the Brookfield police that Ernie was possessed when the crime was committed. The case then went on to trial, where Ernie's defense was demonic possession and the devil made me do it. The jury deliberated for 15 hours over 3 days before convicting Ernie of first-degree manslaughter. He was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in prison, though he only served 5.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next! It's about mysterious small towns from around the world that are hiding some terrible dark secrets that will mess you up. Click the video now to find out more. You won't regret this decision.